Loki in Thor was the lost prince of Asgard. He was the damaged second son, younger brother, and in a way, Thor was the journey of his self-possession, his self-discovery about being who he was. He's not an Odin son, therefore he's Thor's adopted brother. And Thor was about him becoming the god of mischief. At the beginning of the Avengers, he's already the god of mischief. He knows who he is. He knows what he wants. He doesn't need his family anymore. He doesn't need Odin anymore or Thor. And he's more like the god of menace. So rather than being a lost Asgardian prince, he's more like an Asgardian pirate. His motivation is really a deluded one, but you'd only know that if you were standing outside it. He doesn't think he's deluded. His motivation is to gain absolute power, and through that, self-respect. He's come to Earth to rule the human race as their king. And the Avengers are those disposed to stop him from doing that. I love shooting action because my brain switches off. And it's almost like a dance. And once you've got the moves down, all you have to do is fill these moves with the emotion of the scene, or the emotion of throwing that punch or catching it, or it becomes a very, almost a very zen experience. But I trained I'm probably the fittest I've ever been making this film. I had to be, you know, you had just to conjure the stamina to finish the shoot, to get through every single day, to inhabit Loki's volatility and intensity. Well, every Avenger has a different skill set. Obviously, there's his brother, his enemy of old, who's stronger and more powerful physically. With Tony Stark and Iron Man, the challenge is a battle of wits and a battle of strategy and tactic. With the Hulk, you have his breathtaking anger management issues to contend with. A couple of master assassins in the Hawkeye and in Black Widow. Having said that, he's a god, as he keeps restating through the course of the film. Only anyone with superhuman qualities can really stand up to him. How he's managed to not just assemble the different flavors of each character, but also adapt to the needs and the methodology of every actor and every team member is extraordinary. An extraordinary feat of leadership and of creativity and inspiration, and it's unenviable.
What I loved about Coulson from, you know, right away in the first movie was that at first he seems kind of just like an annoying bureaucrat, kind of pestering Tony Stark for an interview, and as the story goes along, to my great thrill, he turns out to be a much more formidable character and who's kind of hiding in plain sight as this guy. And that certainly has been the model for the rest of the movies. You know, every time I get the script, I'm very excited to find out, like, I'm that? I know that? I handle this? And that certainly has kind of culminated to an extent in the Avengers, where, you know, Coulson's very much involved with trying to pull the team together. The real focus of S.H.I.E.L.D. is about developing the Tesseract and, you know, finding out a way to use that vast power. And so suddenly the idea of the Avengers becomes not just appealing, but necessary. And as a person who has interacted with more of the Avengers than almost anybody except Nick Fury, Agent Coulson is definitely detailed to, you know, wrangle them, call them in, talk them in, whatever it takes. It's a really fractious, bizarre family. They know something about what they have and do that nobody else does, you know? And I certainly feel like Nick Fury and Agent Coulson and Agent Romanoff, powers or no, they understand it too. And to see the way Joss managed to make this feel like a living, breathing, epic family, I was so happy to be, from then on, I thought, okay, this is gonna be amazing. Joss you know, has the unbelievable task of bringing all those worlds together in something that kind of takes a step up in terms of how grand and spectacular it is, and to kind of fuse all these characters together, all the worlds that these guys have come up with together into one world that supports this story.
She works with S.H.I.E.L.D., and she's very intelligent and highly trained and very capable. And I kind of like the idea that she's like this woman in a man's world. And I think that she's extremely, she's by the book. And I think that that's hurting her because she's working with a man who sort of works outside the rules. And I feel like that dynamic is in this movie a lot. Throughout the course of the film, she realizes that he is involved and he does care and he is taking the right steps to protect our country and to, you know, fight the bad guys. You can still relate to them on some level, and they still keep their human qualities in terms of caring for others, wanting to do good. You want to aspire to be like them. And I think, like, not only is it like a really fun visual movie-going experience, it's also like, especially with Joss coming onto this project, he's so good at like making them true characters. Like, it's not just guys hitting things and things blowing up. Like, there's a story, there's a through line, and I think that that's really important.
She's the same character as he was in Thor. He's this scientist that has been employed by S.H.I.E.L.D. now to work on the Tesseract, and obviously needs my scientific skills to achieve what he wants to achieve. He's obviously not very good with computers and stuff, but Dr. Selvig is. I think that's very important, and I think that the big event movies in the last couple of decades have been drawn towards having more character in them. They're not only relying on the special effects anymore, which I think the audience likes. They want to see human beings, and they want to see good actors doing their jobs, not only explosions. So I think it's a part of the success, definitely.
What they had done in the movies before was obviously extremely informative and useful and fun, but at that point, Thor and Cap weren't even close to being finished, and there's, you know, there's also the element of, okay, you have all these parts, but how can you possibly bring them together? They don't seem to coexist, and ultimately that is what made me go, oh, this can be done and this should be done. These people don't belong together. These people wouldn't get along, and as soon as that really sort of came into focus, I realized, oh, then I actually have something to say about these people. Marvel had a very clear idea of the kind of spectacle that they wanted and sort of their structure, act-wise, this conflict here, this here, and which was great for me because then I had something to build off of, and the only thing I was interested in building was, well, how do we get there? How does that matter, and how does that action tell us something about the characters we didn't know, so it's not just a checklist, which is very important to me because you don't want to come off of this feeling like a ride. You want to come off of this, and there'll be some riding, God knows, but you want to come off of it feeling like, you know, you got told a story. And so the only thing I really had to worry about was motivating it, was making it matter to these people and making these people matter to the audience. Obviously, Black Widow is a fun character and was played by Scarlett Johansson, 2 points in her favor. She's also a woman. And I was very clear from the start, you cannot have an all-male team. You just can't do it. It's not acceptable. The thing about Sam is I always think that there are two of him. You know, he's famous for the sort of bravura, Pulp Fiction, speechifying. This is a guy who can, you know, out-moxie anybody in the room. But of course, as a huge Unbreakable fan, there's, you know, I'm also very much in love with the great well of sadness that he brings. And my, you know, I told him from the very beginning, and my biggest note throughout the film was less shaft, more glass. Because what I wanted to see was a guy who, yeah, could absolutely command a room with his voice, could absolutely be the guy you would never question was in charge of this enormous organization and everything around it, could be a guy who would do stuff that was morally compromised, yet absolutely necessary, but at the same time would feel the burden of that. You know, to be the leader means to separate yourself from everybody else. Mark was my first wish. Like I made a list, a very short list, and Mark was at the head of it. He was the guy I wanted, and Marvel. And I said, look, I think we want a completely fresh take on this, and I think I know the guy for it. And they're like, well, we're not sure unless it's Mark Ruffalo. We don't even know if. And I was like, what? I just froze. I was like, you got to be kidding. You did not just say that. And then I showed them my list that I had in my wallet, a little piece of paper. And they were completely on board with that. And I think they'd been interested in him before. And, you know, he, as somebody else that so after Robert, he's probably the person I spent the most time with before shooting, which is Annie. And, you know, just talking about anger and how it manifests and different kinds, and you know, so that we could get the Hulk away from being this roaring creature. Jeremy and I, before he even took the role, we talked about who this guy was, what it meant to be a dead shot, that he was, you know, that he was a sniper, that he was the kind of guy who sneaks off by himself, that he's not a team player, that he's always going to find the highest and darkest part of the room, and he's gonna hang out there, so, you know, that vision of him as, you know, just a guy, you know, a real agent, as opposed to a hero, was very useful. And also his relationship with Widow was, you know, enormously useful. At the end of the day, I think, you know, the thing that makes it work is Tom, because he breathes a lot of life into Loki. He doesn't just twirl his mustache, although God knows he gets to be more of the classic Loki than he got to in Thor. In Thor, he had a very poignant and, I thought, beautifully realized arc. In this, he's past that. You can still see hints of it. You can still see that the resentments and the vulnerability and the big brother issues and all that stuff. But he's also gone, you know, to a happier place. And Tom can really bring that presence, the texture, so that you go, yeah, this guy is going to destroy you, either from right in front or from the back, and you don't know which.